各位弟兄姐妹，大家平安。
Peace be with all the brothers and sisters.
我们谈到这个，问几个问题，就是为什么我们在教会里面有人会纷争结党？
And so we are going to discuss one of the common questions is why would there be a lot of divisions or conflict within the church?
纷争结党不一定是自己有一个团契的小组。
And division within the church doesn't necessarily indicate that there is a specific fellowship or a specific small group within it.
比如说我们在达拉斯就有3个族群。
For example, in Dallas we have 3 different
groups. 第一个族群就是中国人，第二个族群是韩国人。
So, for example, in Dallas, we have 3 different groups. One is Chinese people, another is Korean people.
那第3个族群现在有西班牙裔的，还有这个非洲裔的，他们只讲英文的，他们吃饭也会坐在一起。
And the last group is people who might come from Africa or come from Hispanic background, in which they only speak English and they sit together during lunch.
所以你就发觉到中午吃饭的时候。3个群体是非常明显。
And so, especially during lunch, it's very obvious to see the 3 different types of groups.
那为什么我们说这个不是 division， 这个不是纷争结党呢？
But why is it that we can say that it's not count as a division?
是因为他们每一个族群都非常欢迎其他族群能够融入他们。 可以接受其他的族群。
That is to say, because all these groups are very welcoming and they were willing to receive anybody who is willing to join.
只是因为语言的关系、文化的关系，有时候比较舒服坐在这个地方吃饭。
But it's just due to a language, people who are used to the language or used to a specific culture, they are more accustomed to sit with one another.
那这个哥林多教会他说：“我属保罗，我属亚波罗，我属基法，我属基督。”
And so there is the Corinthian church mentions that they are of Paul and of Apollos, of Cephas, or of Christ.
那圣经上讲是说他们因为这样的一个主张呢，他们不说一样的话。第10节。
And it's to say that they are not saying the same thing as mentioned in verse 10.
他们不一心一意，彼此相合。
That they should speak the same thing, that there is no division among them.
There's division.
And that you should be perfectly joined together in the same mind.
那所以当一个族群它跟其他的族群没有办法彼此相合的时候，教会就会产生摩擦跟问题。
And so when different groups are not able to be joined together in the same mind, that is where this conflict can start in the church.
那我们来思想，那为什么这个教会会有一个分门别列、纷争结党的问题呢？
And so why is it that the church can have this issue of division?
就是当你看重不同的恩赐过分注重恩赐过分看重人，而忘记了是恩赐的神的时候你就很容易来分门结党。
And so this division can often start from when you start looking at the grace and start seeing the grace associated with the person instead of the grace of God.
因为我们说过，保罗、彼得、亚波罗他们各有不同的恩赐。
Because we have mentioned before that Paul, Apollos, and Peter have all different types of grace.
当你觉得我这个教会一定要成为宣道的教会那你可能会说，我只有属保罗。
And so if you were like them, then you might think that you are of Paul.
那如果你觉得这个教会一定要是一个牧养的教会，那你就会说我属亚波罗。
And if you thought of your church as more of a pastoring type of church, then you might think you are of Apollos.
那其实不同的恩赐都是圣灵随自己的意识给我们的。
But all these different types of grace is given to us by the Holy Spirit.
所以我们不要因为个人的恩赐而来支持某一个人。
And so we cannot uplift other people or only follow and support specific people based off of their
请你们
grace.
更不要支持离开教会的被除名的工人。
And this is to say we should not even support those who have been excommunicated or have left the church.
很多工人他们被除名是一定有原因的，有时候是不好意思跟弟兄姐妹讲这些负面的东西。
And people who have been excommunicated, they have a reason to be excommunicated, and maybe the church would not want to discuss it due to certain secretive matters.
因为你好像在就是讲别人的坏话这样子哈。
And it's almost as if you're talking bad about this
或
person.
者是如果再讲的话，变成一种 public humility， 那这个是也不是很好。
And this only would become a public humiliation on the person that was
可是我们注意到
excommunicated.
有些信徒这些人他们想要去哪里做圣工，还继续奉献给他们，其实他们所做的工作有时候对教会成为一种伤害。
But there might be some people that will continue to follow this person and even offer money to them, and this actually does a harm to the church.
你知道我们真耶稣教会，你奉献的钱都到总会，
Did you know that all the money that you offer goes to the general?
但是有些离开的人，他收的奉献就是属于他个人的。
But if you offer this money to this person who has departed from the church, all that money goes to them.
所以我们真的不要尤其在美国，我们都非常的 individualism 我们都非常的这个自我大家都很自我。
Especially in America, our culture is very individualistic.
所以有时候弟兄姐妹不会听劝，
So sometimes the people, they might not listen properly.
所以有时候造成教会更大的问题。
And it causes even more problems for the
我
church.
比如说，如果那个被除名的工人又跑到其他国家去给人施洗，这个要怎么做？
And for example, what happens if this person that was excommunicated goes to a separate country? Then how do we ought to do this?
又给人家洗脚，又给人家按手，
And they were washing feet, and they were also laying
这个
hands.
带来教会极大的困扰跟麻烦。
This brings a lot of difficulty and problems for the church.
所以我们在这个时代，我再讲一次，早上讲过了，就是你要听教会的，不要跟个人。
And so, as I mentioned before, this morning you have to listen to the church, not the individual
那
person.
到最后纷争分党不能彼此相合，其中有一个就是非常坚持自己的看法跟意见。
And so, this having a division or having no peace within is being very stubborn within your heart.
其实每个人生命当中都有一些盲点
And so, in our lives, everyone has their own.
，hindsight，blind spot。
They all have their own blind spots.
那你知道，你对道理更不成熟、更不了解的时候，你的盲点就越多越大。
And if you do not understand the teachings or the truths, then your blind spot starts to grow bigger and bigger.
那你一直坚持自己，但是在别人看起来可能是盲点的时候呢，到最后就没有办法相合。
And then if you're always by yourself and you continue to have these blind spots in your faith, then there's sometimes it's not able for you to be well received.
我们来
in
看
the
第
church.
3章的第1节，
Let's look at chapter 3, verse 1.
第1节到第4节。
Chapter 3, verse 1 through 4.
弟兄们，我们从前对你请你读。
Chapter 3, verse 1. And I, brethren, could not speak to you as spiritual people, as to carnal, as to babes in Christ. Verse 2. I fed you with milk and not with solid food, for until now you were not able to receive it, and even now you are still not able. Verse 3. For you are still carnal, for there are envy, strife, and divisions among you. Are you not carnal and behaving like mere men? Verse 4. For when one says, I am of Paul, and another, I am of Apollos, are you not carnal?
这边保罗说，你们实在是没有长大成熟，你们是属肉体的。
And here Paul mentions that they are babes in Christ,
我还需要用汤匙来喂你们呢。
that they need to be fed, they need to be spoon-fed.
为什么你们是？因为你们中间有嫉妒跟纷争啊。
Because there is envy, strife, and divisions among you.
当你种这个轻那个的时候呢，这个当中一定会有嫉妒跟纷争。
And if you are able to act like this, of course there's going to be envy and
那
divisions.
嫉妒跟纷争是双胞胎，哪里有嫉妒，那里就有纷争。
And so if there is envy and division are twins. So if there's envy, then there'll be strife.
Yeah, envy and strife are twins, right?
Yep.
所以呢，我们要提升自己的灵性长大成熟。
And so we need to have a spiritual growth within ourselves.
那我们就比较不会嫉妒纷争，
And so there won't be envy and strife amongst us.
我们就比较能够盲点会比较少一点。
And so we would have less of these blind spots in our
但有时候
lives.
为什么我们会坚持自己的想法呢？
And why is it that we still stick to our own
我一定
methodology?
要保罗，我一定要亚波罗，
That they are continuously saying, I am of Paul, I am of
这是
Apollos.
对人哦。
they are towards a
那
man.
有时候对事我们也很坚持
And even then, we might be very stubborn towards different
因为我
situations
们对事情有观察，
because we have maybe specialized in that
那你的
specific
观察
area.
可能是对的。
And maybe our investigation of this is right.
我们看传道书的11章，
Let's look at Ecclesiastes.
传道书11章
Ecclesiastes chapter 11.
，11章第3节
Ecclesiastes
11:3
11 verse 3.
请你读。
Ecclesiastes chapter 11 verse 3. If the clouds are full of rain, they empty themselves upon the earth. And if a tree falls to the south or to the north, in the place where the tree falls, there it shall lie.
这是一个大自然的观察
And this is a investigation of nature.
所以云满了，雨就落下来；
If the clouds are full, they will rain.
树在哪里倒下去，就存在那里。
If a tree falls to the south or north, it will stay there.
那这个存在那里，可能它又布了新芽，又在那里从那里倒下去，就从那里站起来，
But it may be that tree will develop more roots, and where that tree falls, it will grow again.
或者是化作春泥更复花变成那个大地的养分。
Or maybe it will start to decay and it will become fertilizer for the
那你很
world.
坚持，因为你看到这个道理，反正云满了，雨就一定下来，这个是真理啊，你怎么可以反对呢？
And so you're very sure of this, that if the clouds are full of rain, then it will start to
树在那
rain.
里倒下去，它就在那里存在啊，这是一个真理，你怎么可以反对呢？
If the tree falls to the south or north, it will lie there. This is a fact. How
但
can
是
you
你如果
debate this?
读第5节，他又这样讲
But verse 5, it says,
请你读。
As you do not know what is the way of the wind, or how the bones grow in the womb of her who is with child, so you do not know the works of God who makes everything.
我们有时候观察觉得这是对的，但是其实人世间有些东西我们也看不太准。
So maybe there are things that we know that are truly fact, but there are also an equal number of things that we do not
比
know.
如说风从哪里来？
For example, we do not know what the way of the
今
wind
天
is.
吹南风，明天一定是吹南风吗？
If the wind is blowing south, will it always blow
你
south?
可以为雨开道路吗？你可以叫雨下在这个地方，不下在那个地方吗？
Can you tell the rain where it's going to fall?
雨这一下子在这个城市下，风又改变了，风吹了又改变了。
And in a moment's notice, the wind can change its direction.
那你不晓得那个腹中的胎到底怎么成长的？
And you don't really know how the bones grow within the womb of
你
who's
知道
with
鱼啊，
child.
或者是 mammal， 或者是长颈鹿，或是人呐、前几天的胎，其实你也看不出来有什么不一样。
And in actuality, a lot of mammals, such as giraffes or humans, you cannot tell who is who when they are just a few days old.
但是等到1个月之后，你发觉到 DNA 的秘密呢，它就让人变成人的样子，长颈鹿变成长颈鹿
And
的样
then
子。
with the mystery of DNA, you can see that as they start to develop, you can start to see that it is a giraffe
但
or is
是
a
这个
person.
过程我们怎么样，其实我们也不是太清楚。
But how this actually happens, we are unsure of.
所以万事这个行万事的神的作为，你们更不晓得。
So we do not know the works of God who makes
所以
everything.
我要表达什么呢？
So what am I trying to
就是我们
exemplify?
坚持，是因为我们看到我们以为的真理。
We are very stubborn with this because we see these things and consider it fact.
其实有时候神让我们看不透
But sometimes God does not let us see certain
神在
things.
教会的作为，我们也不一定看得透
And so that likewise, God might not let us see everything that happens within the church.
所以呢，当我们要坚持的时候，我们要想一想，其实神的作为人不一定看得透。
So if we are insisting on a specific thing, we have to remember that God has not necessarily let us see everything within this
那
church.
另外一个，我们会坚持自己的意见，因为我们觉得没有这个意见，教会会倒下来。
And so maybe we might be very stubborn for the specific type of opinion, because if we do not follow this sort of way, then the church
没有
will
亚波罗，
collapse.
教会会倒下来。
If it were not Apollo, then
没有
our
保罗，
church
教
will
会会倒
collapse.
下来。
If there's no Paul, then our church will
那
collapse.
跟早上我们读的，其实人只能够栽种，人只能够浇灌。
And so, and as we have discussed, one person can only plant and they can only
是
water.
神叫它生长。
But it's only God that gives the increase.
所以如果你觉得教会再糟糕，你都不可以用人的方法来帮助教会。
So if there is some sort of issue going on within the church, you cannot use your worldly viewpoint to
你要知道，
solve it.
神一定是在教会做主的。
Because we understand that God is the head of the house.
你说那个约柜有一个乌撒用牛车运约柜。
And so, for example, Uzzah had pulled the Ark of the Covenant with an
这
ox.
是违反律法的。
And this was against the word of God.
那当这个牛失前蹄约柜要倒下来的时候，
And then right when the Ark of the Covenant was about to fall over,
那乌撒就去用手去扶，
Uzzah had reached out his arm to touch and
神
hold
就
the
击打
Ark
他
of
死
the
掉了。
Covenant. And God had struck him and he
我读这
died.
个故事我非常的惊慌。
And so when I read this story, I'm very shocked.
有时候你越热心呢，带给自己是越大的伤害。
Sometimes the more zealous you are, the more harm you do to
那为什
yourself.
么呢？
And why is that?
因为你觉得教会要倒了，约柜要倒了，你一定要去帮助他，一定要去扶他。
Because you see that the church might be collapsing just like the Ark of the Covenant, and you want to help hold it up.
那其实神不用你扶他，
But God does not need you to hold it
神
up.
自己会让约柜再自己回到自己的家。
God will allow the Ark of the Covenant to return to its rightful home.
所以有时候我们要知道，无论这样或那样，我们一定相信教会有神的一个控制。
So we cannot think, and we have to think that no matter what happens, God will control the church.
有时候你看到一些教会一些情形，你很伤心，
And there might be certain situations happening in your church that make you very
怎
sorrowful.
么这样，怎么那样？
How could it be like this?
但是我们要知道，神都在掌握当中。
But we have to understand that God has everything within His
有一
hands.
个教会的一个老执事娘啊，
And so there was a deacon's wife in a church.
那当时那个教会非常的混乱，
And so within this time, the church was very messy
因
and
为那
chaotic
个教会长期没有我们的注目传道
because there was not a resident pastor there to help out with
所以
the
很多负
church.
责人就照自己的方法来管理教会。
And so the church council members would often use their own methods to take care of the church.
那这个其实当时的 chair， 当时的教务他常常在听外教会的道理。
And so at that time, the chair council member would often listen to other denominations, churches,
弟
and
兄姐
see the
妹，如果
methods.
你要听讲道的口才你到外教会可以听到很好的口才。
If you were to think about the different types of speaking methods and public speaking methods within sermonizing, if you look at other churches, they are very good at speaking.
你要听好听的道理就是我说好听不是得救好听不是得救。你要听好听的道理，其实很多牧师讲得很好听
If you want to hear a lot of sermons that are very good sounding, not necessarily edifying, there are plenty of churches outside of True Jesus Church that do this.
所以那个 chair 那个听我们的工人讲到，私底下他就把外教牧师的那时候是有 DVD 都发给信徒私底下要发外教牧师的信徒，他自己是主席是教务
And this church council member, this chair of the church council, was handing out DVDs of different pastors of other church denominations to other people and their sermons.
那有一次，这个老执事娘她做了一个梦
And this deacon's wife had a dream.
梦到那位弟兄背个背包，戴个帽子
And she had a dream that that specific brother was wearing a backpack and a
跟
hat.
他平常的装束一模一样。
And he was exactly the same as he usually
可
is.
是就一直往教会门口一直走，一直走，一直离开教会，一直离开教会。
But he is depicted just walking farther and farther away from the
那个老执事
door
娘
of
一
the
直
church.
一直叫回来你不要跑你回到真耶稣教会
She keeps calling out to him, saying, "You must return. You have to come back." But they weren't
结果
listening.
他都不理
But this person was not
你
listening.
知道这个老执事娘的这个异梦呢，没有几年后真的实现了。这位教务弟兄后来就一步一步的走离开了真耶稣教会。
And this deacon's wife, actually, her dream came true. And in a matter of a few years, this councilman had left.
那为什么我要讲这个故事？
And why is it that I share this
我要
story
说
with
有
you?
神都看到。
Because God is able to see all the matters.
就说教会的成长需要一个时间
And the growth of the church needs some time.
需要一个契机需要一个就是要一个 timing
And there needs to be timing or a timeline when it comes
所
to
以我们一
developing the
定要
church.
相信这个神会照顾他的家。
So we have to have faith that God will take care of His church.
真的有时候我们人真的没有办法，我没有骗你啦。
And so sometimes as a man, you have no methods.
我不晓得有没有跟大家讲过，我去迪亚大概去了10年
And so I went to
Dominican Republic。
Dominican Republic for many years.
10年当中，我就洗礼一个人。
And within 10 years, I've baptized one person.
那个时候没有中国人，只有土著啊。
And so there were no Chinese people in that area.
有时候我祷告就会哭啊，我问神，神啊，你这10年带我来这边做什么？
And so I prayed to God, asking God, why did you send me here?
我什么都没有办法做啊。
I have nothing to do here.
那为什么我们洗那个老人家呢？
And why is it that I have to baptize this person?
因为当时啊，我认为他没有犯罪的可能了，因为他中风了，没有机会再犯罪了。
And so this person was actually paralyzed, and he could not even sin anymore.
我这样讲有点对他们不公平，但是我的观察就是，我们当时所传福音的一些真正进来的都真的很棒哦。但那个社会有时候我觉得，尤其是我们所在的那个传的地方呢，真的一个妈妈进来4个孩子都是不同的爸爸。
And so the culture there was completely different. Like, for example, a mother could have 4 different children, and each child could have a different father.
可是时候到了，神带领一些从大陆来的弟兄姐妹，
But God had provided people who came from mainland China.
那教会又是另外一番风景啊。
And so the church had actually switched up its pace.
所以我们要知道，神都在控制。
So we have to understand that God is in control of
当然，
everything.
过程当中有时候我们会很失望、很伤心，会掉眼泪。
And in the process, we might feel very sorrowful or full of disappointment.
但是你一定要记得，神的家必然兴旺。
But we have to understand that God's house will
神
indeed
的预
prevail.
言不会改变，就是世界耶稣第2次再来之前呢，这耶稣就要传遍天下。
And so so God's prophecy will not change, and that the true Jesus Church will continue to flourish.
那再来，我们说对人的一个看重，对事情的看重，我们现在当然这个哥林多前书呢，他特别讲到人呐、那我们要知道这个，我们要你说盲点就是有时候你没有用圣经来看，没有用圣经的角度来看人呐、
And so sometimes when we look at people, we often have blind spots because we do not look at the Bible in accordance to this.
我们来看第三章，对不起，第3章的21节。
Let's look at chapter 3, verse 21.
3章21节到23节。
Chapter 3, verse 21 to 23.
3章21节到23节，请读。
Chapter 3, verse 21. Therefore, let no one boast in men, for all things are yours. Verse 22. Whether Paul or Apollos or Cephas or the world or life or death or things present or things to come, all are yours. Verse 23. And you are Christ's, and Christ is God's.
这个保罗说呢，第21节说，无论谁都不可以拿人夸口。
And here in verse 21 says that no one can boast in men,
因为万有全是你们的
because all things are yours.
所以保罗在说呢，其实工人是属于信徒啦。
And so the workers are of the believers.
所以无论保罗、亚波罗、彼得、基华都是你们的。
So whether it be Paul or Apollos or Cephas, they are all of the church.
你知道耶稣胜过世界，
And so we know that Jesus has
耶
overcome
稣
this
为我
world.
们生，为我们死，
Jesus had died for our sins,
也为我们来到人间。
and he has come amongst a man.
为什么主耶稣做这些事情呢？
Why is it that Jesus has done all
都
these
是
things?
为了弟兄姐妹，为了你，为了我。
It is for the sake of the brothers and sisters, for you and for me.
现在的平安，将来的永生，也都是为了你，为了我。
The peace that is yet to come and the eternal life is for us.
所以耶稣掌管万有的目的是为了什么呢？
And so Jesus being in charge of all of the universe, what is the purpose
是
of this?
为了弟兄姐妹们哦
It，is
是为了你，为了我，
It's for the brothers and sisters. It's for
不是
you
为
and
了
for
工
me.
人哦，不是为了工人哦。
It's not for the workers. It's
好，
for
我
the
们看以弗所
brethren.
书，
Let's go Ephesians.
以弗所书
Ephesians.
我们来看21节到22节，以弗所书第1章，
Ephesians chapter 1,
第1
verse
章21节、22节。
21 to 22.
好，请读。
Verse 21, far above all principality and power and might and dominion, and every name that is named, not only in this age, but also in that which is to come. Verse 22, and he has put all things under his feet, and gave him to be head over all things to the church.
第22节说，耶稣将万有伏在他的脚下。
Here in verse 22 says that Jesus has put all things underneath his
这
feet.
个万有是什么？
What is all things?
现在跟未来，
It is things that are right now and yet to come.
天上跟地下，
The heavens and the earth.
过去跟就是我们刚刚说生跟死，
Life and death.
那使他为万有万有伏在他脚下，
Yes.
使他为教会做万有。他做万有之首是为了谁呢？
He is head over all things for what purpose?
为教会做万有之首。
He is head over all things to the church.
那谁是教会？
And who is the church?
你跟我就是教会
You and me are the church.
所以耶稣为了你跟我他做了这么多的事情。
And so Jesus has done all these things for you and
我们
me.
再回来看那哥林多前书第3章哦，
Let's return to 1 Corinthians
我们刚读的，
chapter.
所以我们看到万有都是你们的，
You can see that all things is for the sake of you and I.
你们是属基督的
And we are of Christ.
基督又属神
And Christ is of God.
所以这个 hierarchy 是什么？hierarchy 是什么？
And so what is this hierarchy?
这边提到工人属信徒，
We have already discussed that the workers are of the church.
信徒属耶稣，
And that the church is of Jesus.
耶稣属基督
And that Jesus is of Christ.
所以信徒比工人在教会的组织结构里面
And so
他是更高的
the believers are actually higher than the workers.
所以我们因为你不了解，所以你就会说我属这个工人，其实是这个工人属于我们。
And so because they do not understand this, they say they are of a specific worker when the worker actually is of the people.
那你坚持自己对人的看法，其实保罗是因为你对人有一些比较。
And when you have a specific worldly outlook, it's sometimes because you are like to compare.
那你看，我们来看第4章，
Let's look at chapter 4.
第4章的第1节到第3节。
Chapter 4, verse 1 to 3.
4章的1节到3节。
Chapter 4, verse 1. Let a man so consider us as servants of Christ and stewards of the mysteries of God. Verse 2. Moreover, it is required in the stewards that one be found faithful. Verse 3. But with me it is a very small thing that I should be judged by you or by a human court. In fact, I do not even judge myself.
这边保罗在谈到我对我自己的评价是什么？
And so Paul has already discussed his own value.
你们觉得你们在教会做圣工最重要的 quality 是什么？
And so what is the most important quality in order to do holy work within the church?
Leo, what do you think? Humility, OK， 很重要，这个很重要。还有呢？谦卑，还有没有 ？Yes。正确的心很好，还有没有？如果你看第2节，你觉得是什么？
If you look at verse 2, what would that be?
你们刚刚讲那个都很重要，但是这里有一个也很重要的。
So what is suggested before is also very important, but there's also another thing.
Gabriel, how do you define faithfulness? Yeah. 大家有听到吗？你把它重复一次。
You do all that's required of you, no matter how small.
所以在小事上忠心，在大事上就会忠心。
So if you are faithful in the small things, then you will be faithful in the great
你知道，我觉
things.
得参加大会，如果我是一个学员我认为最难的 task 是哪一个？你知道吗
So if I were a participant in a church event, what is the hardest part
？For
of the
example，
task?
你们在这个 NYTS 你们不是都有 duty 吗？你觉得最难的 duty 是哪一个？
And for example, in NYTS, what is the most difficult duty to accomplish?
我认为敲钟的那个最难。
I believe those who have to be the timekeepers is the most difficult.
你要 faithful 那个每一天那么多时段，然后呢，不然你就要一直定闹钟啊，
You have to
不然都会忘记。哎呀，怎么我又忘了敲钟了？
you have to consistently remember when you have to ring the bell, and if you miss it, then you are kicking
因为那
yourself.
个很小，但是很 tedious， 很小的一件事情，但是很小，但是很重要。
It seems very tedious or very small of an issue, but it's
也
actually
很不
quite
容易做
important.
好。
And it's very difficult to do
耶
well.
稣说：“你在小事上忠心，你就在大事上忠
But
心。”
Jesus tells us if you're faithful in the little things, then you'll be faithful in the great things.
所以其实我也觉得忠心真的很重要。有时候我觉得我自己的我只是保罗要求自己，其实不是你完成多少工作，是你付出，不是你完成多少，是你付出多少。你为了这个事情再难，你愿意付出多少心力，而不是你完成多少工作。
And so Paul has already discussed that it's not a matter of how much work you have actually accomplished. It's a matter of how much work you put into it.
因为当你真的尽的时候，你会觉得我良心安，所以你可以尽心、尽性、尽意、尽力的爱主你的神。
And because you know that your conscience is very clear and you're able to love the Lord with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind.
真的你结束之后就感谢主，无论成果怎么样。
And so you're able.
I did my best.
And so you're able to say that you did your best, no matter what the consequence it was.
所以我们做圣工就是一个无愧于心呐。你的良心真的没有愧，因为每个人的恩赐不一样。
And so when we do this holy work, we will have an unguilty conscience.
我们来看箴言的25章。
Let's look at Proverbs.
箴言25章13节。
Let's look at Proverbs chapter 5.
25.
Verse 25.
13节。
Verse 13.
25章13节。
Proverbs chapter 25, verse 13.
我请你读。
25 verse 13. Like the cold of snow in the time of harvest is a faithful messenger to those who send him. For he refreshes the soul of his master.
忠心的使者使猜他的人心里舒畅，好像收割的时候有冰雪的凉气如果你曾经去住过 Houston，
And so if you have previously visited Houston
你
before,
们家 AC 坏掉了，
and your air conditioner was broke,
那个上礼拜在达拉斯教会的 AC 坏掉了，
and so last week in Dallas Church our air conditioner broke,
那个小朋友他们在教室里面真的受不了啊，
and all the students in the RE classrooms, they could not handle this heat.
很想要离开这个教室，因为他那一半他的 AC 是一个坏掉了，所以另外一半很凉快另外一半他们的教室特别热。
And so half of the air conditioning unit had broke, so they really wanted to leave that specific
那
classroom
你
because
知道
it was
达
really
拉斯
hot.
不够 humid，Houston 很 humid
And Dallas is not that humid, but Houston is very humid.
那如果你真的在那个地方你可以享受到 AC， 你会觉得哇，真的好舒服啊。
And if you're able to feel the AC, then you would feel very comfortable.
你们不觉得 AC 很重要，对不对？因为 California is a very 很棒的地方，对不对？
And don't you think California is such a great place just because of the air conditioning?
你们不一定要 AC 啦 ，sometimes
You don't necessarily need the air conditioning.
如果你去非洲看看，没有 AC 的地方，你看看。
And if you, for example, if you were to experience somewhere like Africa where there's no air conditioning
真
at
的，有
all,
的弟兄姐妹到那边去，那个洗完澡几分钟之后又开始流汗了。
and you can see that even after a few minutes after taking a shower, you start to sweat
所以
again.
刚刚有一个姐妹跟我说，她也去那个，她说他们买了一个什么，一个电子的风扇是吧？一个风扇，不用插电的风，因为没有电了，就不用插电的风扇了。
And it's just like a sister just shared that when she went to Africa, she had to buy a personal fan without charging.
那圣经上讲说，如果你真的忠心，叫别人猜你的人就感觉上说，好像真的很热的时候，突然之间变得好像有冷气这样子。
And so a faithful messenger who is faithful to those who send him, it refreshes the soul of his masters like the cold of snow.
但是如果你不忠心呢
But if you are not faithful,
19节，读
verse
19节。
19, confidence in an unfaithful man in a time of trouble is like a bad tooth and a foot out of joint.
你牙痛过吗？
Have you ever had a toothache?
如果你不忠心，主耶稣看到你就牙痛了。
And if you are not faithful, then Jesus will look at you and have a toothache.
这个不忠心的人就是牙破了，这个骨头错缝了，骨头破了。
And so an unfaithful man is like a bad tooth or a foot out of joint.
那所以这个我们做圣工，每一个人，无论保罗、亚波罗，大家都要自己要求自己。
And so, no matter what, if you're a worker of God, you must have your own requirements of yourself.
那你比较他们，其实他们自己都不比较自己啊。
And so, when people might have compared each other, but they didn't compare themselves.
所以我们要知道为什么会有一个 division，因为 你一直抬他，你是抬轿子的，他想下轿你都不让他下，你一直的，有时候你们懂这个意思吗？他是坐轿，对不对？你把他抬，他很想下来啊，你不让他下来，那教会就出问题了。
And so, like for example, you keep on putting someone up on a pedestal, and then even though they want to step off, you continue to uplift them.
保罗说我都不比较自己，你拿我跟彼得比较做什么？
And so Paul is saying that he doesn't even compare himself with other people. Why are you comparing
那
me
你为
with
什么一直
Peter?
把我抬得高高的？我不要啊！可是你又不让我下来啊！
Why do you keep on lifting me up and putting me up on a pedestal? I want to go down.
所以有时候有些人骄傲不是他想骄傲，是你一直的弟兄姐妹一直的
Yeah.
一直的push like。
Yeah, okay. So sometimes a person, they don't want to be proud, but they are unfortunately proud because other people
因为
keep
太
on
多 follower 了，太多人跟随他了，所以他我觉得我不需要啊。
And so sometimes people, they think that they don't want to be proud, but they unfortunately will be proud because they have so many followers.
我刚才讲一遍，保罗说我都不比较自己，你拿我跟彼得比较做什么？
Paul is mentioning that he doesn't even compare himself, but why is other people comparing him with Peter?
所以有时候教会有问题，跟弟兄姐妹心态不成熟也有关系。
And so sometimes there are divisions or issues within the church because the brothers and sisters are not mature in faith.
那第4节、第5节这个我跟这个主题没有什么关系，但是呢，是我学很久的经文。
And so verse 4 and 5 is something that I studied for quite a bit.
Even though it's not related to our major topic，
Yeah.
你知道，有时候我们都觉得自己没有错。
And so sometimes we think there's nothing wrong with us.
我们在做事情，我们都不会觉得自己有错。
And so when we do other things to other people, we think we are justified.
但是保罗说呢，我虽然自己觉得没有错，主耶稣也不一定会说我是对的。这是一个非常重要的心态哦。
And so Paul specifically mentions that even though he thinks he is justified and all the things that he does is without fault, it doesn't necessarily mean that God will say the same.
所以你还要留一个空间说，虽然我都觉得我对，但是呢，主怎么看？
So you have to give yourself a little bit of space to think and consider, even though everything I do is right, what does God think of me?
到时候我们就会被显明出来。
And so therefore, that's why it will come out.
那另外一点呢，就是所以我刚刚说的这个弟兄姐妹我们不要比较工人呐。
And so, as mentioned before, we can, as brothers and sisters, do not compare these workers.
我们来看约翰福音。
Let's look at John.
我们不要比较自己，也不要比较别人。
We cannot compare with one another, but we cannot compare other people as well.
我们来看第21章约翰福音21章21节。
Gospel of John, chapter 21, verse 21.
21章21节，
Chapter 21, verse 21.
请读。
Chapter 21, verse
21节、22节。
Verse 21, Peter seeing him said to Jesus, "But Lord, what about this man?" Verse 22, Jesus said to him, "If I will that he remain till I come, what is that to you? You follow me."
23节。
Verse 23, Then this saying went out among the brethren that this disciple would not die. Yet Jesus did not say to him that he would not die. But if I will that he remain till I come, what is that to you?
这本书是约翰写的
This is the book that John had written.
那这个耶稣跟这个彼得讲说呢，你将来呢手要被绑起来，被人家带到要伸出手来，别人要把你束上，你要被带到不愿意去的地方。
And
第
so
18节。
in verse 18, Jesus tells Peter that most assuredly I say to you, when you are younger, you girded yourself and walked when you wish, but when you are old, you will stretch out your hands, and another will gird you and carry you when you do not
这是指
wish.
着他将来要为主耶稣被倒钉十字架说的。
And so this is to say that Peter will also be crucified for the sake of
那
Jesus.
彼得听到自己的结局是为主殉道。
And so we can see that Peter is going to hear his outcome, that he will be martyred for the sake of Jesus.
那他就问那约翰呢？约翰怎么样？
And so Peter obviously wanted to know what happened to John.
那耶稣就说：如果我要等到他，让他等到我第二次再来，跟你有什么关系？
And Jesus said to him, "If I will that he remain till I come, what is that to you?"
就是你不要拿自己跟彼得比啦。
And so he's trying to tell Peter not to compare himself with John.
所以有时候我们会有不和睦，是因为彼此相比哦。
So sometimes there's not unity within the church because you're constantly comparing one another.
所以不需要这样做，因为你们在学校已经习惯了，你跟别人的比较，你已经习惯了，你是一个什么样的 level， 所以我们遇到什么事情就开始，我在这个群体里面，我是在什么样的一个地位。
And so maybe you are used to in college comparing yourself academically with other people and seeing your academic standing. And so oftentimes you want to consider yourself in the context of other people.
那其实神说这是不需要的。
But God tells us that this is not necessary.
如果你真的不爱读书，不是不爱了哈，不会读书了，you try but it's not working。如果你真的不是读书的料。
And so if you're not very good with academics, and even though you try, you're still not that great.
你也不要伤心了。
You shouldn't be very
你一定有些
sorrowful
东
about
西
it.
你可以比别人做得更好的，真的。
There are plenty of other things that you could be better at than other
因为我们
people.
在这个时代长大，我们大家都是在比学业。
And so we are growing up in this type of society where we talk about academia quite a bit.
为什么很多人割腕，有些人跳楼？为什么？
And why is it that a lot of people they self-harm or they commit suicide?
因为他们本来觉得自己很厉害，结果到一个很好的学校才会知道自己没有那么厉害。
And it's because a lot of times these people consider themselves to be the best of the best, but once they go to a better school, they realize they are small.
那就觉得自己很没有用啊，就跳楼了。
And so they realize that they're so minuscule in the context of things, and they decide to
如
commit
果
suicide.
话又说，如果你 academic 真的很厉害，你读什么你都记得住。
And even in the case that you are so good at academics, you're able to memorize everything that you read.
你要知道，人上有人，有的人还比你更厉害。
You have to understand that somewhere along in the world, there's someone better than
所以
you.
成长就是接受自己是谁啊。
And to mature is to understand who you are as a person.
然后呢，按照神给你的恩赐去创造一番天地啊。
And so you are able to take the grace that God has given to you to apply it to the rest of the world.
有段时间，有一个孩子，他很失望他的学业，
And so there's this one person that was very upset about their academics.
所以他自己割了好几次啊。
And so they would commit self-harm they would commit.
他爸爸知道了很伤心啊，
And so the father was very upset about this.
跟他讲说，开卡车也跟他讲，开卡车也很好呢。
But he was trying to console his son and saying, if you were to drive these trucks, it'd be a very good job as well.
真的啊，这个没什么不好啊，只要守安息日就好了。
And there's nothing wrong with this job as long as you observe the Sabbath.
我跟他讲说，我那个爸爸跟他讲说，你看那个阿根廷的弟兄姐妹，他们很多人都没有读书，生活一样过得很好。
And this father was telling his son that you can see there's plenty of people like such, for example, people in Argentina, they do not study anything further and they still have a very good life.
他们甚至有一个很极端的观念，觉得念书有什么用？念书也不一定赚的钱比我更多。
And so and they have this type of
extreme 啊，这
extreme.
个也不对啦。
In Argentina, they have the extreme where they don't really consider studying very useful.
那所以我要说的是，你们要成长，就是你要找到自己在神的国，你独特的地方在哪里，可以发挥你的恩赐。
And so you have to mature is to understand where you are in God's world and how you're able to live out this grace.
那你就可以不用再跟别人比较，
And you're not going to compare yourself with other
也不要
people.
给自己打分数，
And so you cannot score yourself in
你
that.
只要努力就好了。
All you need to do is
你
work
努力依靠
faithfully.
神，
You have to work faithfully and you have to rely on
你发觉
God.
到你的一生就会比较没有那么多困扰啊。
And then you will realize gradually that your life is without any
那我们再回到哥
worries.
林多教会，为什么他们今天纷争结党？就是他们一定要比较两个工人啊。
And that is why you can see that there's so much issues with the Corinthian church because they consistently try to compare the different
可是
workers.
耶稣说呢，约翰怎么样，跟你有什么关系？
But Jesus has already told Peter that what is it to you what happens to John?
所以我们有这些观念我们就真的教会我们有更健康的观念呢，教会就更能够同心合意。
And so we have a more healthy mentality when it comes to the church, then we can see that there will be a more united church.
那教会不同心合意产生什么问题呢？
If a church is not united, what kind of problems can occur?
我们来读一下那个 当然他们就没有办法就是没有和睦的一个结果啊。
And so this type of outcome is very not peaceful.
那我们再来看3章哈。
Let's look at chapter 3.
对不起，2章。
Chapter 2.
2章4节。
Chapter 2, verse 4.
2章4节。
Chapter 2, verse 4. And my speech and my preaching were not with persuasive words of human wisdom, but in
对不起，
demonstration.
第3节我说错，第3节。
Verse 3. And I was with you in weakness, in fear, and in much trembling.
如果教会不和睦哈，真的保罗都会觉得在你们当中呢，我又软弱又惧怕又战惊啊。
The result of division, as you can see here, he is with them in weakness, in fear, and in much trembling.
那教会不和睦哈，真的有的人就觉得，不只是工人很失望，那你会知道，其实，教会有些人就觉得他们好像当王一样哦。
And so, if the church is divided, the workers are not only very disappointed in this fact, but also there are some people that might consider themselves the ruler of the church.
我们来看第4章。
Let's look at chapter 4.
第8节。
Chapter 4, verse 8.
因为你们这个坚持己见哦，觉得自己都很对，到最后给别人的感觉是什么呢？
And so, if you always consistently are, if you're always trying to, if you always consider yourself as right, then what is the outcome?
我们看第8节。
Verse 8. Verse 8. You are already full. You are already rich. You have reigned as kings without us, and indeed, I could wish you did reign, that we also might reign with you.
保罗说：“不用我们自己就做王了，你们觉得自己很棒了啦。你看哦，那个教会纷争结党的结果就是，好多人都觉得自己就是我这个就是教会，我说了算了，我说了算。”
The result of division within the church is that everyone can reign as kings, and that whatever they say is fact.
那结果我们用很快的时间讲，那怎么处理这个问题呢？保罗怎么处理这个问题呢？
But how does Paul deal with this issue?
你看保罗用4章在谈这个问题。
And you can see Paul uses 4 chapters to discuss this issue.
那保罗用的方法就是把他们打倒，再把他们扶起来的方法。
And so Paul uses the method of encouraging them by striking them down and lifting them up.
保罗怎么给他们打倒呢？
How does Paul strike them
我
down?
们来看1章的26节。
Chapter 1, verse 26.
1章26节。
Chapter 1, verse 26 and 27. Verse 26. For you see your calling, brethren, that many wise according to the flesh, many not wise. For that many wise according to the flesh, not many mighty, not many noble are called. Verse 27. But God has chosen the foolish things of the world to put to shame the wise, and God has chosen the weak things of the world to put to shame the
你
things
们
which
觉
are
得自己
mighty.
很有智慧哦，很有知识哦。
So Paul's saying, you think you are very wise and you're very great.
那其实你们被拣选那个时候，你们真的有智慧的，真的很多吗？
But when you were called, were you noble? Were you wise?
你能力的其实也不多啊。
Were you mighty?
那虽然我们不一定那么厉害，但是神还是拣选我们呢、
And so we ourselves are not that capable, but God chooses us
后
anyway.
来保罗又说：“你们是不成熟的，你们像婴孩，你们是属肉体的。”
Paul-
我们读过了第3章那边讲的哦。
Paul later says in chapter 3 that they are infants.
所以保罗拿一个棍子啊，打他们打个半死啊，
And so Paul is taking a stick and hitting them
然
figuratively.
后最后又把他们扶到天上去啊，
But then he then lifts them up all the way to the
因
heavens
为万有都是你们的。
because all is yours.
所以保罗是用这个方法打死再扶起来，
So
打倒再扶起来。
Paul is dealing with division by striking them down and then lifting them up.
就像耶利米先生说的，重新拆毁再重新建造。
And so just as Jeremiah has mentioned that God will tear down but also raise up.
请问有没有用？保罗那个口水多过茶，讲话讲到口水多过于茶，
So Paul has
讲
spoken
很
a
多的
lot.
话，讲很多的话，讲到口水多过茶，讲很多的话，但是有没有用？没有用啊！
So Paul has spoken a lot to the point where he has,
所以教会如果有时候不同心不是你讲几篇道理啊，你讲的多么深入啊，你用多好的 strategy 啊，
So
其
Paul
实问题还是存在。
enacts a lot of different strategies, and he also uses a lot of different types of ways to convince the Corinthian church, but there's not much result.
这个有时候需要时间的。
And so other solution would
所以
be
保罗
time.
也没有用哥林多前书也没有解决啊。
And so Paul was not able to deal with the issue with the Corinthians.
其实到最后是提多去解决的啊。
And later on, it ended up being Titus.
那我们现在没有时间讲了。
So we do not have any.
我要讲的是，有时候教会合一需要时间。
So to say the church, in order to be unified, sometimes requires time.
有时候神改变一些情况。
Sometimes God will just change the situation.
那教会就在神的一个祝福下面继续成长。
And that under God's abidance, it will continue to grow.
所以我们要继续为教会祷告。
So we have to continue to pray for the church.
我们尽力做。
And so we have to continuously.
成果交给主耶稣基督。
And then we have to continue to do the work.
我们明天再看其他的工人他们怎么做，有关于这个教会不合一他们怎么做。
And so we can see how the other workers dealt with the division of the church too.
我再讲一句话就好了。我们最后看一个经文就好了。
Let's look at another
因为跟这个有关系。我们看那个15章。
1 Corinthians chapter 15.
对不起，16章。
1 Corinthians chapter 16.
16章的12节。
Chapter 16, verse 12.
请读。
Chapter 16, verse 12. Now concerning our brother Apollos, I strongly urged him to come to you with the brethren, but he was quite unwilling to come at this time. However, he will come when he has a
那
convenient
保罗
time.
希望亚波罗去解决一下这个纷争结党的问题啊。
So Apollos really urged him to come over and fix the
亚波
problem
罗
with
说
the
我不去
Corinthians.
啊。
And Apollos said, I will not go.
至少这个时候我不去了。
At least for this time, he will not
因为
go.
他们一直把我抬得高高的啊。
Because all they do is lift me up on a
有的
pedestal.
人又把我踢到门外啊。
And other people, they do not welcome me.
我
They
去
kick me to
那
the
问
curb.
题更严重而已啊。
And when all that happens when I come is that there are more
所以
problems.
如果你不能成为 part of solution， 你也不要成为 part of problem。
So if you are not part of the solution, then you should not be part of the problem.
你就避开这个问题啊。
You have to depart from this issue.
因为无论怎么样，你都是当事人，你本来就是问题的一部分呢。
Because no matter what, you are a person, and then you will be a part of the problem.
不是你的问题，是大家的问题，是教会的问题啊。
If it's
不是保罗的问题，是弟兄姐妹的问题啊。
If it's not your problem, then it's the entire church's problem. You're a part of the church.
可是你去，可能问题又会更大。
But if you go and you join in on this problem, then this
所以他
problem
很
will
聪明
grow.
啊。
So Apollos is very smart in
我
this
这个时候绝
aspect.
对不去了。
He has decided he's not going to go to the Corinthian
所
church
以
at
如
that
果你
time.
不能成为答案的一部分，至少不要成为问题的一部分。
If you do not want to be part of the solution, then you should not be part of the problem.
这个是亚波罗解决的方法。
And this is the solution that Apollos had.
那我再讲一遍，需要时间，
And so again, you need time.
需要不同的人。
You need different. Pray in silence.